You know, one of the most confusing moments after walking away from an avoidant person is wondering what they're thinking. You tell yourself, if they didn't care when I was around, they probably don't care now. But that's not the whole truth. The truth is avoidants do feel something when you go no contact. They just experience it in a very different way than you might expect. When you pull away, an avoidant doesn't immediately panic or chase. They don't send the late night text, they don't beg you to come back, and that silence can sting. But beneath that calm surface, something starts to shift. They start to notice the space. For the first time in a long time, they feel the absence of your emotional energy, the care, the warmth, the attention that once made them feel safe, even when they pretended not to need it. Avoidants crave connection, but they also fear it. They want closeness, yet the moment they feel it, their instincts tell them to run. So when you go no contact, you interrupt their cycle. You stop chasing, stop proving your worth, and suddenly they're left alone with their own thoughts. That silence, it forces them to confront what they've been avoiding all along. The realization that love doesn't have to mean losing control. What they secretly hope for isn't punishment or pain. They hope you don't forget them. They want to believe that even though you've stepped back, there's still a small thread connecting you. They hope you still think about them, still wonder if they're okay, but they also want to feel safe from pressure. Your absence gives them space to feel something they couldn't feel before. Curiosity. Curiosity about what you're doing, about who you're becoming, and about whether they misjudged the connection they ran from. And here's the irony, when you go no contact, they often start to reframe the story. They remember the good moments, they remember the way you made them feel seen, but this time they see it without the noise, without the panic of losing their independence. That's when growth can happen for them and for you, because going no contact isn't about manipulation, it's about clarity, it's about saying, I deserve to be met halfway. It's not a strategy to win them back, it's a moment to win yourself back. And if they ever do come forward again, it won't be because you begged for their love. It'll be because your silence spoke louder than your words. No contact isn't about punishing the avoidant. It's about protecting your peace. It's about showing them and yourself that love doesn't mean chasing someone who's running away. It means creating enough space for truth to rise to the surface, because only in that quiet can both people finally decide whether love is something they can meet each other in without fear. When you step away from someone who has an avoidant attachment style, you're not just walking away physically, you're creating emotional space that speaks louder than any words could. This space isn't about revenge or silence for the sake of pride. It's about shifting the dynamic that's been quietly exhausting you for months, maybe years. Avoidants live in a cycle of push and pull. The closer you get, the more they retreat. It's not that they don't want love. They do. But intimacy to them feels like standing too close to a flame. It's warm and beautiful, but it burns if they stay there too long. When you go no contact, you interrupt that pattern. You stop feeding the loop that keeps both of you stuck. The endless reassure on seeking on your part and the endless retreating on theirs. Suddenly, the rhythm changes. There's no more chasing, no more just checking in, no more emotional safety net waiting on the other end of the phone. That's when the space starts to work. For the first time, the avoidant has to sit with silence. And silence is something they've spent their whole life avoiding. At first, they might feel relief. They tell themselves, good, I needed this space. It feels like freedom to them, a release from pressure. But that's the thing about space. It's not static. It evolves. As the days turn into weeks, that initial relief begins to shift. They start to notice the absence of your energy, the softness of your presence that used to make their world feel less cold. They miss your texts, your laughter, your grounding energy that always reached them even when they acted like it didn't. That's when the space begins to whisper truths they can't ignore. You see, avoidants don't process emotion the way others do. They suppress, rationalize, and distract. But when you go quiet, when your energy no longer fills their emotional landscape, they're left to face themselves. The quiet makes them aware of how much they depended on you for emotional stability, even if they never admitted it. They start to question their narrative. Asterisk, did I push away someone who actually cared? Was I too quick to withdraw? Asterisk, that awareness can be deeply uncomfortable for them, but it's necessary. This space also becomes your healing ground. It's the invisible boundary that separates what you can control from what you can't. By choosing distance, you're no longer trying to teach them how to love you. You're teaching yourself how to stop overgiving. The power of that decision is transformative because you're no longer reacting to their emotional unavailability. You're creating an environment where awareness can bloom for both sides. And here's the quiet irony. The moment you stop reaching out, you become the mirror they can no longer avoid. They start to see themselves more clearly, not through your constant forgiveness or understanding, but through the stark reflection of your absence. That's what space does. It teaches, it reveals, it holds up a mirror to the parts of someone that comfort never could. So while silence may feel like loss at first, it's actually a catalyst. It's the turning point where growth begins, not through talking, not through fixing, but through space. The kind of space that invites awareness to finally take its rightful place between two people who have been dancing too close to their own fears for far too long. Avoidants often confuse the world with their calmness. To anyone watching, it seems like they don't care, like they've moved on effortlessly, while you're left wondering if what you shared ever mattered at all. Their stillness can feel cold, their detachment can feel cruel, and yet beneath that exterior lies a storm they don't know how to navigate. The truth is, avoidants feel deeply. They just process emotions in silence, behind walls they built long before you ever met them. Their calm is not absence of feeling, it's self-protection disguised as composure. When connection starts to deepen, an avoidance instinct is to withdraw. It's not because they want to hurt you, but because vulnerability feels unsafe. They've learned somewhere along the line that love can suffocate, that needing someone makes them weak, that closeness means losing themselves. So they shut down the very emotions that threaten to expose their longing for connection. When you were reaching out, giving more, trying to bridge the gap, they seemed unmoved. But underneath that surface, there was conflict, a tug-of war between wanting to stay and needing to run. When you finally go silent, that calm exterior doesn't immediately crumble. On the outside, they may even seem relieved. They convince themselves they wanted this, that space was necessary, that it's better this way. But emotions don't vanish, they only go quiet for a while, and in that quiet, feelings begin to echo louder. They notice the emptiness of their routine, the sudden lack of messages, the warmth that once came from knowing someone cared. Avoidants often realize what they feel when it's gone, because distance gives them the safety to feel without the fear of being consumed by it. It's easy to mistake their silence for indifference, but for an avoidant, emotions unfold slowly, like a film developing in a dark room. At first, there's nothing to see, and then slowly outlines appear. Memories, sensations, the sound of your laugh, the way you made them feel safe even when they couldn't admit it. These fragments start to pierce the emotional numbness they hide behind. They start to remember not just what you did, but how your presence made their walls a little less necessary. Avoidants feel more than they show, but expression is not their language. Instead of reaching out, they might distract themselves, work harder, scroll endlessly, or fill their calendar with noise. Anything to escape the vulnerability rising within them. But no amount of distraction fully replaces connection. Deep down, they sense what's missing. They miss the emotional predictability you brought, even though that predictability once felt like pressure. That contradiction defines them, craving love but fearing the loss of control that comes with it. Their calmness, then, isn't peace, it's delay. A delay in processing, a delay in responding, a delay in realizing. It's not that they don't feel, it's that they don't feel safely. And sometimes it takes the stillness of your absence for those feelings to find their way to the surface. Your silence becomes the mirror that reflects their hidden emotions back at them. They begin to feel what they spent so long avoiding, the ache of connection, the pull of memory, the quiet proof that they cared far more than they ever dared to show. When you go no contact, something paradoxical happens inside the avoidant. They breathe a sigh of relief, and yet, almost immediately, a quiet unease begins to build. That's because avoidants often live in two emotional realities at once. They crave connection but fear dependency. They want to feel wanted, but they're terrified of feeling trapped. So when you step back, you unknowingly give them what they've always thought they wanted: space. But that space doesn't stay peaceful for long. Slowly, it turns into a void, a space where your presence used to live, and they begin to wonder if you still think about them, if they still exist somewhere in your mind. Avoidants hope for something complicated when you pull away. They don't necessarily want you back right away. They want reassurance without contact. They want to feel remembered without having to be vulnerable. In their mind, the ideal scenario is that you still care, that you still feel their absence, that you still wonder what they're doing, but that you don't demand closeness. It's the emotional equivalent of wanting to keep a light burning in the distance, not too close to blind them, but close enough to remind them they're not forgotten. This hope is rooted in fear. The avoidant's biggest emotional contradiction is that they long for love but don't trust it. Deep down, they hope you'll stay connected to them energetically, even while you're apart, because it soothes the loneliness they try so hard to hide. They want to know you haven't moved on completely, that your heart hasn't closed. They might even check your social media or replay old conversations just to feel that small, invisible thread of connection that still ties you together, but they'll never admit this because admitting it feels too exposing. Their silence then is rarely empty. It's full of hidden wishes. They hope you're thinking of them when you post something meaningful. They hope your absence isn't permanent. They hope you miss them enough to make the first move, yet not enough to pressure them. It's an emotional tightrope. They want the warmth of your care without the responsibility of your closeness. That's why their reactions often feel confusing. They might appear distant one day and subtly nostalgic the next. It's not manipulation. It's fear wearing the mask of indifference. When you go no contact, you take away the constant validation that used to reassure them, and that's when their emotional reality starts to unravel. The comfort of knowing you're there if they need you begins to fade, and with that loss comes curiosity. They start to wonder who you're becoming without them, whether you're happier now, whether they underestimated your strength. That curiosity is powerful. It's often the first crack in the wall they've built between love and fear. What avoidants secretly hope for is continuity. They want to believe that even in your silence, some invisible part of you is still holding space for them. But the beauty of no contact is that it shifts that hope. Over time, they begin to sense the strength in your absence, the quiet message that you are no longer waiting. And while part of them fears that truth, another part finally starts to understand what real connection requires. Not possession, not control, but the courage to meet love halfway. Going no contact isn't a tactic to make someone miss you. It's an act of self-preservation. When you finally stop reaching out to an avoidant partner, it's not because you've stopped caring. It's because you've realized that caring alone isn't enough to sustain a relationship. You reach a point where constantly proving your worth, chasing clarity, and waiting for emotional crumbs begins to erode your own sense of peace. No contact becomes the boundary you draw not to hurt them, but to heal yourself. It's the moment you stop asking asterisk, how can I make them stay, asterisk, and start asking asterisk, why am I staying where I'm not met halfway? Asterisk avoidants often interpret distance as rejection, but in truth, no contact isn't rejection, it's redirection. It redirects your focus from them to you. It stops the emotional hemorrhaging that happens when you keep investing in someone who cannot or will not match your emotional availability. When you were in constant communication, your energy was tied up in their moods, their silences, their unpredictable waves of affection. You became the emotional caretaker, trying to bridge the gap every time they pulled away. No contact severs that unhealthy attachment by reclaiming your energy from a space where it was being drained instead of reciprocated. In those early days of silence, you might feel the urge to break it. You might wonder if they've noticed your absence or if they even care. That's natural because for so long, your sense of value was tied to their response. But every time you resist the urge to reach out, you're teaching yourself something powerful, that your worth isn't dependent on someone else's recognition. You're retraining your nervous system to find peace in your own stillness, not in someone's inconsistent attention. That's what no contact truly is, a process of rewiring your relationship with yourself. For the avoidant, your silence might trigger confusion. They're used to you being the one who keeps the connection alive. When that energy disappears, they're forced to face the space they've created. They may interpret your silence as withdrawal, but it's not a game. It's clarity. It's you saying, asterisk, I'm no longer participating in a dynamic where I'm the only one showing up. Asterisk, that clarity, while uncomfortable for them, is essential. It gives them the opportunity to confront their own emotional patterns instead of relying on your efforts to maintain the bond. No contact is not about teaching them a lesson. It's about remembering your own. It's about realizing that love without reciprocity becomes self-abandonment. It's about understanding that sometimes the only way to break the cycle is to stop dancing to the rhythm of their avoidance. Your silence becomes your boundary, your healing, your voice. It's not punishment, it's peace. And while they might wonder if you'll ever reach out again, the real transformation happens within you. Because, for the first time, your energy isn't trying to convince someone to love you. It's being poured back into rebuilding your confidence, your calm, and your self-respect. No contact isn't about them missing you. It's about you remembering yourself. Healing doesn't always arrive with closure, a conversation, or a moment of understanding. Sometimes it comes wrapped in silence, the kind that feels heavy at first, almost unbearable, but slowly starts to soften around the edges. When you go no contact, you step into that silence, and though it can feel like a void, it's actually a sacred space. It's the space where both people finally begin to see things clearly. For the avoidant, it's the first time they can feel without fear of being overwhelmed. For you, it's the first time you can breathe without waiting for someone else to meet your emotional needs. Healing happens quietly here, in the stillness between two people who have stopped trying to fix each other. Avoidants often experience love as pressure. Every time someone gets close, their instincts tell them they're about to lose control. So they withdraw, not because they don't care, but because closeness feels like danger. When you go no contact, that perceived danger disappears, the pressure lifts, and in that relief, something unexpected starts to happen: reflection. They begin to notice what they miss, not from fear of loss, but from recognition of connection. The silence gives them space to sit with their emotions without feeling cornered by them. It's often in your absence that they start to process what your presence truly meant. Meanwhile, your own healing takes root in that same silence. When you stop reaching out, you start to rediscover the parts of yourself that were buried under the effort of maintaining the relationship. You start to remember what peace feels like, what it means to be emotionally steady without constantly waiting for someone else to reciprocate. You begin to rebuild the self-trust that got lost when you kept trying to earn love instead of receiving it naturally. The quiet teaches you to listen to your intuition again, to believe that stepping away wasn't weakness but wisdom. The healing that unfolds during no contact isn't loud or dramatic, it's subtle. One day you notice you're not checking your phone as much. You're not replaying old conversations, trying to decode mixed signals. Instead, you're thinking about your own dreams, your own boundaries, your own peace. That's how healing announces itself, not with fanfare, but with freedom. For the avoidant, silence becomes a mirror. It reflects their patterns back to them. They begin to sense the consequences of emotional distance, not because you told them, but because they can finally feel it. They might not admit it, but your absence challenges their comfort zone. It exposes how connection can vanish when it isn't nurtured. And for some, that realization becomes the starting point of growth. A recognition that love doesn't have to mean losing themselves, and that closeness isn't the enemy. For you, the lesson is even deeper. You learn that walking away isn't the end of love, it's the beginning of self-respect. You realize that healing doesn't depend on their return, their apology, or their awareness. Healing happens when you stop trying to fix someone who wasn't ready to be held and start holding yourself instead. In that silence, growth takes root for both of you, because the truth is, sometimes distance teaches what closeness never could. In the end, going no contact isn't about punishment or pride, it's about peace. It's the quiet courage to step back so both hearts can see clearly again. It's the moment you stop chasing closure and start creating it within yourself. Whether the avoidant learns from the silence or not, you've already won something greater: clarity, strength, and the freedom to love without losing yourself. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the loudest form of love is the silence that finally teaches you your own worth.